Good evening, everyone. If I could have your attention. For those of you who don't know me, I am Gregory Burke, Director of the Power Plant, and it is my special honour tonight to welcome you to the opening event for Power Talks. For the fourth year running, Art Toronto has commissioned the Power Plant to devise and organise a talks program for the fair. We've had great speakers in the past, and I'm delighted to say that this year's lineup is no exception. It's a fabulous lineup, in fact. And so over the next 3 days, we will be joined by critics, publishers, museum directors, curators, and other arts professionals from places such as New York, London, Buffalo, Vancouver, and of course Toronto, as they reflect on the art world in a time of cultural and economic flux. Now, I just wanted to mention that the Power Plant does have a booth at the fair, which features work from our current and somewhat acclaimed exhibition, Candy Sprite's Same Same, as well as a new edition of photographic works that we've produced in collaboration with Candy Sprites. The Power Plant, I should remind you, is a quick walk away, just 5 minutes walk down by the lake from here, so if you haven't had a chance to see the show yet, I hope that you will do so. At the Power Plant, we are, of course, indebted to a number of people, but we have annual funding from the Canada Council for the Arts, the Ontario Arts Council, and the Toronto Arts Council. And our public programs, the primary education sponsor for those programs is CIBC Wood Gundy, and we very much appreciate their support. Before I introduce tonight's speaker, I'd also like to pay tribute to the staff of the Power Plant who've done a fantastic job in organising the talks, and in particular I want to thank Senior Curator Helena Reckett and Assistant Curator John Davies for the work in developing and programming the weekend series. And now it gives me great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker for tonight, Richard Flood. As Chief Curator at the New Museum of Contemporary Art in New York, Richard is a defining force within the contemporary art world. Richard started his professional life as an art critic and managing editor at Art Forum, and subsequently worked as a curator at PS1 Contemporary Art Gallery in New York, and that was in a very important time in the 80s where PS1 was really still very much a ferment and a kind of a laboratory for a lot of interesting developments. For the decade following, Richard was director at the Barbara Gladstone Gallery. There he is credited with establishing the gallery's reputation for representing some of today's most influential contemporary artists, including Matthew Barney, with whom Richard has had a long-standing professional relationship, which of course resulted in the exhibition Cremaster 2 and the Drones exposition. For the following decade, Richard was senior curator at the Walker Art Center in Minneapolis, where he also served as deputy director for a period. His curatorial projects there included Brilliant, New Art from London, and Zero to Infinity, Arte Povera, 1962 to 1972. Richard was also centrally involved in the museum's impressive renovation by Herzog and de Meuron. In 2006, Flood was recruited and lured back to New York to assume his current position at the new museum. To launch the museum's SANAA-designed building in 2007, Flood and his team organised Unmonumental, a polemical exhibition of assemblage and college-based works that the New York Times described as a gauntlet thrown down to other New York museums. Richard's talk for us tonight is called Tearing Down the House, Notes on Contemporary Curating, and I'm sure it will be riveting and a delight. So please join me in welcoming Richard Flood.
Thank you very much. I'm going to try and do a variety of things tonight, so be patient if I jump around a little bit. The Tearing Down the House title came from a retreat I was on with Helena, the esteemed curator at the Power Plant. And I must say, in general, I'm really thrilled to be here as a guest of the Power Plant. It's really been a lighthouse for Canadian art and for international art. For all of us, it's a wonderful, inspirational place. But we were at a retreat for an organization called Creative Capital, which assists artists in getting real in terms of entering the world and figuring out how to market and pay for their work. At one of the panels, I was babbling on about the need for change in museums, and one of the young people in the audience goes, "Why don't we just burn them all down?" And I was like, I should have I don't know why I didn't get irritated. It was like, well, it's an interesting comment, and if you take it metaphorically, maybe it's not such a bad idea. Hence my ramble this evening. I wanted to just talk about, put contemporary curating and current curating in the context of something that has been happening for like 5 years, but just aggressively happened a year ago when all of a sudden the economic bottom fell out of everything, not just culture. And it changed everything for a lot of things. I can only address what I come from, which is the artistic community. It wasn't visible. Before it happened, it wasn't visible, although I think everybody who was selling art knew that, in fact, something was about to explode. I think the auction houses were well aware that prices had gone as high as they could possibly go. Everybody was like looking for a market adjustment. But I think everybody thought it was going to be a bit of a phenomenon like an apple falling from a tree. In fact, it was an atomic bomb exploding, and everything overnight. Values changed. The way people looked at each other changed. The relationship between auction houses and collectors and dealers and artists changed. It was a radical overhaul. Obviously, what had happened was, for the past 2 decades, art became equivalent with money. It all of a sudden, its main value is what it could accrue in the marketplace. The auction houses, in my opinion, were the ones who stirred the pot most aggressively, but everybody else did too. Everybody wanted it to go on for as long as it possibly could. What resulted now is a market where you have bottom feeders versus connoisseurs. The bottom feeders are doing what is necessary. They're going out there. They're looking for things that are cheap. Now here we are at another art fair. I just returned from Frieze Fair in London. I'll be going to the Miami Art Fair in Miami. My assistant just came back from an art fair in Tbilisi, Georgia. I mean, these things are all over the place, and people are going to them. Whether they're buying or not, I don't know. The word in the aisles in London was everybody was doing really well. However, I can tell you that there were 20% less galleries and easily 30% less people on the floor of the space where it was being held. I think also the other thing that you've got playing here is you're seeing, while you're having these art fairs, you're seeing fewer and fewer international exhibitions. And this is mainly a post 9/11 reaction, because you are dealing with phenomenal amounts of insurance. You try to import an exhibition, and you've got like all of, this mound of extra insurance that most institutions, unless they are very, very fixed in terms of their endowments and the continuing ability of their endowments to draw, which is another issue, simply cannot afford. So people are also being driven to the art fairs and the spectacle exhibitions because of that. Well, where are we now? I mean, the economic forecast, maybe somebody here can tell me more than I know already, but I see empty, blank faces, empty eyes when I ask, where are we going? The endowment losses are extraordinary. The box office losses play right into discretionary income that people have to play around with. I think you see it more obviously in statistics for how movies are doing at the box office. They're way, way down. There is now an an almost complete absence of corporate support. Everybody was building. You had years and years of building the best, the most beautiful museums in the world with the best, most sophisticated architectural practices. I've been a part of it twice, and luckily the new museum building went up well in advance of the crisis, but it could have been. There are hiring freezes all over the place. People leave, they're not replaced. There are layoffs, there's frozen salaries, and extended exhibition schedules. I know this is sounding like I was reading Edgar Allan Poe the whole week prior to putting the notes together, but I mean, it's important that we establish that this is a very real situation, because in the end, it does affect everything. Now, where does a curator come in? Who are these new curators who are going to get what this situation is about? Well, I'm not really sure. I think you can train them. I think experience can chasten them. It's certainly chastening me as I age deeper into this business. But I know that the things that have to continue happening are that for a curator, the quality of engagement with the work is supreme. It is the most important thing, because somebody is going to be taking 3 years easy out of their lives to devote to a system of thinking about art, a particular artist, a moment in history. And if you do not have that quality of engagement, it can get very lonely in there the second year in, when nobody is really saying, oh, this is really necessary. The breadth of knowledge. I think it's the old, I'm talking about this because I'm terrified that humanities is being drained out of our education. Breadth of knowledge is so important in terms of beating away the awful kind of prison of specialization. I think somebody who is specialized is going to have very, very sleepless nights, because specialization just leads you deeper. It doesn't make you broader. It doesn't help you understand anything. I think modesty, always crucial. A curator is completely in service to the artist, to the period of history, everything I just talked about. And if you go in thinking you are better than the topic, you're dead wrong. It's never going to work out. An ability to function in the real world now more than ever. Curators are increasingly being asked to go out and get the money for the exhibitions they want to do. And this is like a very tough thing, because curators can be very delicate people. They really don't know what dirty money feels like in their little hands. They don't know how to ask for money for themselves. And in this particular case, you're asking for your exhibition. Getting up and making that cold phone call can be really make you nervous, set you on edge for the day. But you got to do all these things. You got to understand hierarchies. You've got to understand how to function in the real world. You need a knowledge of budgeting. Oy, the worst thing I could imagine. And I've been very lucky. I've had 2 wonderful assistants who just are brilliant at doing their sums, but you got to be aware of it, and you got to watch it carefully, and you have to know what you're doing. You have to have a readiness to sell the programs. And I think all of us in the business, and I think any curators who are sitting here in the room, will tell you, you go where you can go to spread the word. It's very, very crucial. And you're spreading the word about what you love, but you're also spreading the word about the institutions that are supporting you and making your dreams possible to be realized. You need to have a really distinct awareness of the role of trustees and a willingness to cultivate them and others. I think every museum is looking for more trustees, always. They have to come in, they have to be refreshed. You've got to keep increasing the enthusiasm at the board. Maybe every once in a while you need to refresh it and bring in some really annoying radical thinkers who are going to say, I don't see it that way. It's a horrible idea, but at the same time, you've got to do it. You've got to have people who are going to challenge you. You've got to know how the galleries and the auction houses work. I think another thing that is really important, and this is something we all share together, is like, what do we read? How do we build our information base? And I myself am an inveterate reader, but I'm also a roadkill or a potential roadkill on the road to the future in terms of technology. I think curators need to read as much as possible, and it's not just about their field. I think they've got to read about the world, and they've got to know what's going on in the world, and they better have an opinion about it. I think that's essential. I think newspapers, internet, television, radio, they're all part of the sources. In the States, we're blessed with an incredible public radio system, NPR, but maybe I close my ears in the taxi cab when somebody has a right-wing station on. But I've grown, I have this compulsion now to listen to what the people who are saying the things that scare me are really saying. What are they talking about? I don't think you have to do it, but I got it. I think art magazines, while we still have them, are great to read, are great to look at. Many I've stopped reading, but I still look at them. And I think this visual culture is of real importance. It lets you know what you can tolerate, what you can't tolerate, what you want to get behind, and what you want to see behind you. And they're dying. Print is dying. So I'm also, this is a rallying cry. Get out there and touch a book. I also think specialized journals, and it could be Science Times, it can be anything, but something that like asks you to look at your own humanity in a different way, even if it's better understanding your own body. Novels, poetry. There is such an aggressive and wonderful poetry arena out there, and some of the most exciting artists that I can think of are working in poetry. Then who is looking where? How can you look at it as fully as possible? I think cinema remains hugely important, whether documentary or narrative. I think that is the next thing that this is the final before I get to self-promotion, is that I think for curators and collectors, and maybe just people trying to find a mission with their own life, the following things are really important. Analyze your collection. Don't be afraid to just think about what you've got. And your collection can be anything. It's however you choose to humanize your environment. It could be those, the 400 gewgaws that you inherited from Aunt Tilly. But it's like, know why you have them. Think about that. Know your mission. Do you want more of the gewgaws? Then go out and start becoming an expert in them. Find out where they are. Where's the biggest hoard of gewgaws in the world? Create a collection plan, short-term, long-term. Know the market. And this is, I would say if you're just going out shopping and you want good, fresh produce, you're creating a mission for yourself, and you got to know the market. In the particular case, know the vendor, know the dealers, know what they're willing to do for you. Befriend them if you want more from them. Let them know. A lot of people go in and think they've been treated very arrogantly by somebody who just isn't willing to stop their afternoon and show them every drawing they have in their gallery. Well, they're looking at you and thinking, well, I've never seen you before, and I have 100 people who are supporting my artists. Why should I take time out for you? One of them might walk in. So you want to have a little charm there anyway. Know the personnel in everything that you do. Differentiate for yourselves the difference between opportunity and impulse. They're really different, and they can get very sticky. Then I would also say, for people in my field, you got to know your director. You know, for Helena, it's really good the more she knows about Greg. For me, it's the more I know about Lisa Phillips, the happier my life will be. Know your trustees, because they're going to be the ones in the end who are going to put that extra effort out to help you get in touch with that one more person who can help you meet the budget for your exhibition. Know the philanthropists, and this is not necessarily, philanthropists and collectors can be very, very different, very, very different people. Philanthropists have the most unbelievably different kinds of needs for their own, for where they apply their own money. And philanthropy is always a battle for hearts and minds. It's not a simple, oh, I'm a philanthropist, here you go. You know, they want something, and so they should. I think also the need for artist residencies is really important now, artist commissions, because a lot of that's not happening the way it used to, where cities are throwing money at public art funds and et cetera. And I think you need to know how your future in the web, where your future in the web lies. I am surrounded, fortunately, by very bright young people who are taking me to amazing places every day of the week, and I thank them for it. And then finally, for all of us, you have to have a moment and a willingness to overturn convention. It's really, really important. So the new museum, I won't read it, you can read it, but it's in a great part of Manhattan. It's lower Manhattan. Things just feel different down there. I swear the air is better, the quality of the food is better. The new museum is 30 years old, 30 plus years old. Most of its career was spent at Broadway and Prince Street. We're now 6 blocks east on the Bowery, which is one of the great legendary streets of the city. It's where the farms began. The farms turned into the mansions of the rich. The mansions of the rich turned into theaters, chop houses, bordellos, and then at the end of World War I, you had the Depression, all the money moved out, the L went up, and you had a dark street, and classically, there are so many songs about the Bowery in American U.S. culture that it's amazing. The Ballad of the Forgotten Man starts there under the L. The building that we put up almost 2 years ago was designed by SANAA, a young Japanese architectural practice. It was plopped into a tiny footprint, a parking lot. These are the schematics of this 60,000 square foot building. This is the building itself. And as you can see, the stacks, oh, I didn't say, I'm sorry. I violated trust there. At any rate, the building, every time a cube turns, that means that there are skylights. So that's the kind of genius of the building, that in the middle of this very dense New York environment, you actually are getting natural light into almost every level of the museum. A big point was the openness, the literal porousness of the museum, so that from the street you could see what was going on inside. 3 buildings down the block is the Bowery Mission, one of the most famous shelters for homeless in the United States. It's legendary and a part of fiction and documentary. It's a fully functioning operation. It's huge. It sleeps well in excess of 160 people. It's a food kitchen. It's there for spiritual healing as well. And the street life generated by the Bowery Mission is very real. This is the inside looking out, so there are almost no divisions between the building and the street. The first floor is intentionally free of charge. You can come in, you can use a bathroom, you can see an exhibition, you can go, hopefully you've just come in to spend a fortune in the shop. There's a window gallery, and that's the very end. It's completely visible from the street. There's a cafe in front of it. Because the Bowery is also the largest retail center for restaurant supplies, there are hundreds, literally hundreds of stores selling chairs for restaurants. And so the architects went out and just bought all the chairs from the different retailers up and down the Bowery, mixed in with some wonderful Franz West chairs, which are the plaid on the left. This is the window gallery looking out, and this is part of an exhibition by a senior American abstract artist, Mary Heilman, who finally is getting her due at the age of 69. This is a show with a collective called Urban China. Urban China is a quarterly magazine that is run by architects, information designers, city planners. And they go all over the world and analyze, among other things, Chinatowns in different cultures. This is the lower level. The theater is on the left of this. It's an installation by an architect and information designer named Jeffrey Inaba. And the idea was every museum has a donor wall. Well, we wanted to go that one further, and so we did a donor hall. And what you can see are symbols of prosperity from different cultures, are like cartoon motifs. Then you have these sushi, pizza, film reels, which also spell out different areas for giving from, here we have political movements, which will tell you, and it's the money that is spent purely for culture. So Ron Perlman gives probably 200 million less than Hamas. And it's fascinating. And then all of the gray area is an embedded text, which has thousands of quotes about the nature of philanthropy. And this is where we have like crush lines to get in for the lectures or the performances or the concerts. And so it's a great place. It starts wonderful, wonderful discussions. So we've got to keep this going. This one's been up a little longer than intended because of that funny adjustment we had to make last year. This is the interior of the space. It's used here. Obviously, it's a lecture. In this case, it's Kathy Opie, the wonderful photographer. But it's also the seats clear up. You've got a sprung floor. You can do dance, whatever. The acoustics are great for new music. This is the very top of the building. It's a place called the Sky Room. We use it as a revenue enhancer, but on the weekends it's always open to the public. It's unprogrammed. We move chairs, tables. There's a bar, and a coffee bar there. There's a terrace where people can go out and experience all of Lower Manhattan. It's really quite beautiful and quite amazing. This is part of the this is a really bad slide. This is part of the 5th floor of the museum, which is dedicated to two ongoing projects. One is called Museum as Hub. And I'll speak about it very briefly, but it's probably one of the things that I think is most important about the work we're doing now. We have loose alliances with 4 other institutions across the globe. We have one in Cairo, one in Mexico City, one in Eindhoven, Holland, and one in Seoul, Korea. We have been doing exhibitions with them, shuffling them from place to place. We're in a constant dialogue with them. We actually stream symposia that are taking place at the others. We meet with them twice a year. We've just gone through a 3-day symposia where we're hoping to add another partner from Shanghai, another partner from Douala in the Cameroon. And this is moving along very organically. It's become a huge source for helping us with the exhibitions, the group exhibitions that we do as we're creating this global advisory system of peers and colleagues really from all over the place. This is a vignette from the opening exhibition, which we had a theory that people were working with broken things. People were puttering. The whole age of fabrication was coming to an end. And so Unmonumental became very important. You're looking at a piece by Isa Genskin. The show was done in 4 sequences to just kind of show our audience the breadth of what we were looking at, but also to introduce a kind of radical new practice. So it started out purely with sculpture. Here's the same room. That sculpture is on the far right, and on the back wall is a 35-foot collage by the artist Mark Bradford. So each gallery, collage was added. After collage, technology was added. After technology, sound was added. So there were 4 reasons to come back. There were 4 books done on each of the additions to the exhibition. This is on the top floor, foreground, an amazing piece by Rachel Harrison called Huffy Howler. Our national disgrace, Mel Gibson as Braveheart, is like stuck on the back of that. And here it is with an amazing collage and a huge sculpture by Sam Durant poking into the frame. This is a staircase, a bonus staircase that the architects gave us. We call it the Shaft Gallery, with some irony intended. And basically, where there's a person entering into a space, the room is 8 foot square by 35 feet high. We invite artists to come in there. They can have anywhere from 2 weeks to 3 months notice. The work is up for anywhere from a month to 3 months, and I'll show you the most recent iteration. This is Rigo 23, a Portuguese artist working in America. This is an installation about 3 Black Panthers who were rounded up and thrown into solitary confinement to remain in prison, and are known really all over the world for what they've done for prison reform. The one was let out on good behavior. He came to the opening, he lectured. The cell, the 8 foot square room became the cell. A metaphor for the cell they experienced. This is just shows you the kind of amazing wonder of the skylights. All of the floors have no columns. They're completely open. This is a Toma Abst exhibition. This is a show with walls up by the wonderful Mexican artist Danielle Guzman. Who I did an exhibition with Danielle and your national treasure, Stephen Scher, from Vancouver. This is Mary Heilman, who introduced the whole notion of rolling chairs so that everybody could sit and move around with the exhibition as they desire. There were 12 chairs and a suite of children's chairs as well. This is Elizabeth Payton. This show just opened in Belgium. Here is a vignette from a show called After Nature, and that is, of course, the always naughty Maurizio Catalan's horse bolting through the wall. This was for us a very important exhibition that we did with Jeremy Deller called It Is What It Is. In the background, you see a car from the coffee district in Baghdad that was completely bombed. We invited a number of people soldiers who had done a couple of terms in Iraq, Iraqi citizens, translators, people who worked with Doctors Without Borders, UN representatives who went in. It was a list of 40-some people who would come, sit. You could find out who was going to be there at any given time, and people came in, had dialogue, sat, talked. I mean, incredibly traumatic episodes took place there, but they were beautiful. They were really essential. Jeremy then took it on the road, and here you see the young guy is a soldier who did 2 terms, who really hadn't talked about his experiences until he signed up to volunteer. And in the middle is an Iraqi professor and translator in this country. He now functions as a translator. They took it on the road for 7 weeks, and it ended up at the Hammer Museum on the West Coast. This is an excerpt from a show called Younger Than Jesus, which was the first of our triennials looking at artists under 33. This is a really under 33 in every sense of the word, a guy named Ryan Trecarton, who's since made a big splash. This is the top gallery. This is a show that I just finished with an amazing South African photographer, David Goldblatt, 79 years old. He treks every week. He started photographing prior to apartheid, during apartheid, and now. And the exhibition was, you see, in this particular aspect of the exhibition, the show covered 2 floors. You see a photograph that he took during apartheid matched. He goes back, and the other photograph is what it is now. And it's this quiet, really, really quiet images filled with this kind of desperate understanding of what has passed in the landscape. It was quite brilliant. This is literally what's happening in the galleries right now. This is a piece of sculpture by the Swiss artist Urs Fischer. These are the pieces that are already installed. On the floor, you can see very vaguely 2 little melting crutches, which looked like tiny aliens moving through this incredibly E.T. kind of landscape. The show is really quite amazing. It opens on Tuesday. This is what's going to be in the shaft. It's a motion-activated tongue that shoves itself through the wall, flaps around covered in sawdust, and then withdraws. So yes, we can be childish too. This is an exhibition I'm working for this summer by a Brazilian artist named Ravani Neuenschwander. And this piece is called Rain Rains, or Chove Chuva. And it is a 4-hour cycle of rainfall that we'll be doing in the gallery. It's quite amazing. And then you readjust the buckets. I think of it as very similar to the economy at this moment in time. You just keep going for equilibrium. So I think, yes, we're a little 3 minutes after, I think, and that's where I am. And yeah, so we can take questions, if there are questions. Yes. There are 3 different collections, but we have a moratorium on collecting now. Which has been, that was one of the first things that I went to the trustees for a request to just put a moratorium on it. Because the collection is not, it's unlikely one would ever use it for anything other than accessorizing. It doesn't hang together. No, the Altoids Collection, the Altoids Collection is kaput right now because Altoids changed hands. And the new agency is not interested. But for about 8 years, Altoids gave us an amount of money to produce a show that was purely dedicated to young artists. That was the huge mandate, young artists. And it's a big part of our mission as well. And so using a network of advisors across the country, was purely within the United States, we selected a group of people, 20-some artists, were juried down, and then there was an exhibition, and the exhibition always toured, and at the end of the tour it was brought into the new museum collection. But it was very much spray a room, hit a rose. There are amazing things in it just because the timing was great. Yes.
How did you choose the artists that you featured in your younger pieces?
Again, that was the full utilization of all of our advisors. And there were different categories. People were weighted differently for a variety of reasons. And the number 500 it was edited down to 500. And those 500 have a catalog where everyone has a page in the catalog. It's kind of like a huge Facebook. And then that 500 was edited down to 50 who got another catalog that was much more about the theory of their practice. And those 50 were the subjects of the exhibition. And it was the entire museum. So everybody got a decent amount of space.
Did you find that any of the artists who were finalists kind of fell into a movement, or were they all sort of individual?
No, they did. I mean, and this is where, it's the old story about the anthropologist. Once the anthropologist arrives, does the tribe change because he's there or not? I think we found a kind of amazing underscoring of the instinct that got us to Unmonumental. However, there was also we were very surprised insofar as there was also a kind of real streak of minimalism that we weren't suspecting. I mean, when I say minimalism, I mean a very povera, an Italian kind of minimalism. Yes?
Just wondering if you would comment maybe on the role of print media in the operation of the museum, how it stands now, and what you see for the future of the relationship between museums and print journalism. Can you repeat the question?
I got thrown off at the very end. Print journalism, not prints as a...
Print journalism.
Oh, the relationship between the museum and print journalism. What a good question. I mean, New York, like any city. I mean, when I was at the Walker, there was one newspaper in the city, one daily. It had a woman who was an art writer, who had been the former PR director at the Walker, who hated the institution, had been fired. And so it was like every time we did another show, it was like, well, the Walker did it again, and it was like, oh, you just kind of, it was like you got beat up every time you changed a show. In New York, it's not all that different. I mean, the New York Times rules, and it's art writers have been there for 100 years. You know exactly which ones do which trick, and you hang around and wait to hear who's got the assignment. And you can tell whether you're going to be massacred or get a crowd on the weekend just by the name that you're given. It's what's good about New York is there's so many magazines based there, weekly and monthly and quarterly. So that's great. I find that my colleagues are much, much more interested in what the blogs are saying. I mean, I think they've completely replaced, especially for young people, young artists and so forth. I think they've completely replaced print. I hear, cries of distress from outside my office because my office is for one reason or another, in the heart of external affairs, and it's the blogs.
I could understand that the museum partners with several emerging countries, and I believe that since 2006 there was this enormous raise of the prices in the art market, especially, and sometimes this
Yes. The question was the downturn in the economy, did it affect our partners in different countries? And the answer is yes, absolutely. I mean, Mexico, the Tamayo Museum is a very established, wonderful museum, but the government just got rid of one director, replaced him summarily, and cut the education program radically, who we had been working very, very closely, I mean, really parallel with. Holland, no. There was no difference. The Dutch just keep supporting the arts. That was interesting, but Seoul, the government stopped funding the INSA art space. Cairo, they had a lot of problems as well. But that's a very independent, I mean, Townhouse Gallery, they're all fascinating, but that's a place that just keeps growing because it uses neighborhood methods to become an international center.
I'm just curious, where would you say in the world today is some of the most, I guess, exciting or interesting art coming out of? And is there, do you think somewhere in the future might be more interesting?
You know, we tend to, the curatorial team actually tends to pick off areas of specialization through preference. So one of my colleagues is completely classically based in the European tradition. Another is completely nuts for Eastern Europe and the East. I am focusing as hard as I can on Latin America. Yes, our director of education and programming, who's also a full curator, is Korean American and very involved in Korea, Japan, China. So everybody's kind of going somewhere else. Yeah, there's another one who seems to be specializing in the stands, like Tajikistan, Kazakhstan. But I mean, really, this is like he's got this thing. I don't know if he's looking to trade horses or strike it rich in coal. But yeah. Yes.
Thank you for the lecture, and your program is very good. But what are you doing? You're talking about, and we all know that people are spending less money in discretionary funds for admission and so on. So how are you approaching trying to engage the public? Are there incentives there to get the numbers you need?
Oh boy, I mean, that's. I mean, all of us have our own answers to that question. I mean, we're coming up with like, come in, get a free sandwich. You know, it's like you're like every week somebody's like got another brainstorm. It's like, if you liked what you saw today, come back next week and you get a free pass with your ticket. We have what I haven't talked about is we have a really, really aggressive performing arts program. And that is another place where we really kind of are trying to make sure that audience, as much as possible, is parallel to the visual arts audience. And traditionally, they really never are. They don't come together, but we're really working very hard at that. We drink tickets. Everybody loves drink ticket. You do what you got to do and hope that you're doing it early enough to appeal to people. And that they will return. I mean, it's interesting. Our largest number of visitors are people from the United States, but immediately after that, they're French. And the largest number of complaints is, why do we not have materials in French? We were translating into Chinese and Spanish. You know, the grant unfortunately ran out, but you know, it's like so. And then after that, it's Germany, and I think it's because those countries, very very early on, covered us heavily when we were opening. And I think that interest has continued. And there's so many European stringers in Manhattan that you also know that you're going to get very good coverage that way. And then you stay, I mean, more in answer to your question, you suck up to these people whenever possible. You know, oh, wow, I really love what you wrote last week. That was fantastic. Your insight was particularly strong this occasion. Well, if the publishers had their way, you'd be generating their revenue. You make almost nothing on your books. You hope that you get like 200 to 300 upfront copies for your bookstore, and you work that percentage. But it's not really where the money is. And we had a great deal. We have one great deal with Phaidon, who has right of first refusal to our books. And there we make money, just because somehow the publisher of that particular publishing house got very interested in the programs and the books. But normally it's not a profit area. Touring, you hope, when you're touring your shows, you hope that you break even. If something's on the road if you can sustain it, which you almost never can, for let's say 5 to 6 venues, maybe you make some money.
You talked a little bit about how the art world should respond to the current economic situation. I'm curious about what you think we'll see in the art in the next 2 to 5 to 10 years as a result of the discussion.
Well, I think we're already seeing it. I really do think fabrication is like kind of gotten up and gone away, unless you're showing with Gagosian or something. I mean, there you really do see, you know, the show after show after show of precious materials fabricated into enormous things. But I go back to when the AIDS epidemic was at its height in the 80s in New York. Art changed. It completely changed. All of a sudden, people were using paper. I mean, it was like everything was like the last thing you were ever going to make. And Ralph Rugoff, who was then a freelance curator and wonderful writer, he's now the director of the Hayward Gallery in London, did an exhibition called Just Pathetic. And it wasn't insulting on any level. It was like a really deeply devotional title. And I think right now you're kind of seeing a little bit of that again. You're seeing things that are very fragile, that hang together as much through crafting materials as corten and rivets. And I think it's a very, very interesting period. I'm not a huge painting person, but I think painting is looking very good again. The canvases are getting small. There's a kind of actual passion for content back that had been gone for quite a while. Yes. Yeah, I mean, they're really, they're great partners if you're doing what they want you to do. They're horrible partners if you're not. So they like to be used completely. They hate walls. Because there is not one right angle in the building. If you think you're going to throw up a wall easily, you're really mistaken. The architects created a number of very, very interesting tests for a curator to pass in order to find out how to gracefully use the spaces. We're getting better at it, but I have to say it's not an easy adjustment. The 4th floor, we have almost completely stopped trying to drop any walls in whatsoever. It does not like it. So now, and the room, if you leave it as it is, it seems almost completely Euclidean. It's not at all, but it seems that way. The second floor, which is the largest, we can get away with doing more. But it's very interesting. I mean, the artist who's working now there now, who I showed you, Urs Fischer, on the third floor, I mean, he puts you through every possible test. On the third floor, lowered the ceiling by about 8 feet, which means we had to bring down the sprinklers, the air supply, the electricity, and then he retrofitted with a number of beams that are not there. So you have this, you walk in, and I'm dying to find out if the public feels anything. I feel like the weight of the room is on my shoulders, but it wasn't lit when I mean, I'm dying to see what this thing looks like when I go back. Yes?
You know, you describe a presence in the art world now that is greatly regulated by pragmatics, by the argument of survival. In your estimation, is there any room any longer for persuasion from an idealistic perspective?
I think everybody is more involved in dialogue than they have been in a long time. And I don't, I mean, I see that through our performing arts program, through our education program. And I think when we do the exhibitions, as much as possible, we're trying to host the voice of the artists in them. So it's that kind of verbal exchange has become hugely important. I think in the city, I mean, in New York, we're very lucky because it's such a concentration of different places, but performance, the whole notion of performance, durational performance, is like back. It's like somebody paid $1 billion and said, I want to see durational performance, because it's all over the place. And that's different. That's a change. There's a series now called Performa that everybody pays into. It's like the company store, you know. They take the credit, you do the work, but it's a brilliant success. It's very, very good. I think one's communication with the schools, we work very, very closely with Columbia. Someplace else might work much more closely with NYU, another with Bard. But for us, Columbia is a huge resource, both for thinking and for talent and for collaboration. I think there's also a lot more random publishing going on, publishing that's happening under the radar. Yeah.
One follow-up to that. When you talk about performance, obviously implied in that is the nature of entertainment and being directed in some way. Again, in your perspective, what is the role that you see for the private muse in introspective thought in the contemporary museum?
It's getting harder and harder to find it, I have to say, because I mean, I think the thing is, it's getting the numbers, and that can, I mean, you have to really pull yourself back from the constant analysis of the numbers to get to what you're talking about. We try to keep, as much as possible, we try to keep the voice in the galleries. We have people who are neither guards nor docents who are there to just chat. We're against interpretation, so nobody's going to come up and tell you, you know, are you having trouble getting what that means? No. But it's like, you know, is there anything I can tell you about? Is there anything I can, you know, and it's not like, I'm not saying what we're telling them to do is, oh, here's the recipe for that. But rather, you know, oh, I've had this question about it myself, and it's interesting to hear what you're saying. And our front desk staff are amazing. They will banter away for as long as you let them. And we don't really try to pull anybody back, whether they're working in the shop or on the floor of the galleries. It's like the whole notion of conversation is really important. I remember when we were starting this hub initiative that I talked to you about, we had a series of symposium that was open to staff and trustees while we were trying to figure out what it should be. And there was one guy in the whole series who came in and he said, look, I'm telling you this, the best way, the easiest way to do this is all you need is a pot of coffee, a card table, and 2 chairs. And in the end, he was right, I think. Yes. Oh, yeah. I mean, Nancy is somebody who I knew. For a brief period of time, I represented Leon and had a German partner who represented Nancy. Yeah, I mean, what a couple. It was amazing. And I hope we have one very good Spiro in the collection, which will go up in the lobby next week in memoriam. Yeah. All righty then. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. If I could have your attention. For those of you who don't know me, I am Gregory Burke, Director of the Power Plant, and it is my special honour tonight to welcome you to the opening event for Power Talks. For the 4th year running, Art Toronto has commissioned the Power Plant to devise and organise a talks program for the fair. We've had great speakers in the past, and I'm delighted to say that this year's lineup is no exception. It's a fabulous lineup, in fact. And so over the next 3 days, we'll be joined by critics, publishers, museum directors, curators, and other arts professionals from places such as New York, London, Buffalo, Vancouver, and of course Toronto, as they reflect on the art world in a time of cultural and economic flux. Now, I just wanted to mention that the Power Plant does have a booth at the fair, which features work from our current and somewhat acclaimed exhibition, Candy Sprite's Same, as well as a new edition of photographic works that we've produced in collaboration with Candy Sprites. The Power Plant, I should remind you, is a quick walk away, just 5 minutes walk down by the lake from here, so if you haven't had a chance to see the show yet, I hope that you will do so. At the Power Plant, we are, of course, indebted to a number of people, but we have annual funding from the Canada Council for the Arts, the Ontario Arts Council, and the Toronto Arts Council. And our public programs, the primary education sponsor for those programs is CIBC Wood Gundy, and we very much appreciate their support. Before I introduce tonight's speaker, I'd also like to pay tribute to the staff of the Power Plant who've done a fantastic job in organising the talks, and in particular I want to thank Senior Curator Helena Reckett and Assistant Curator John Davies for the work in developing and programming the weekend series. And now it gives me great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker for tonight, Richard Flood. As Chief Curator at the New Museum of Contemporary Art in New York, Richard is a defining force within the contemporary art world. Richard started his professional life as an art critic and managing editor at Art Forum, and subsequently worked as a curator at PS1 Contemporary Art Gallery in New York, and that was in a very important time in the 80s where PS1 was really still very much a ferment and a kind of a laboratory for